Hey everyone, Sam here. Thanks for joining me. I hope you're having a beautiful day wherever you are in the world. So I'm outdoors again for this intro in northern New Zealand in my local area. This is not far away from where I live. And the theme of this video is I've been painting some oil painting studies in my car, some ideas that I see out on the landscape that I can perhaps use to paint some landscape artworks in my studio. And I've been using this little painting journal, which I got from artist Scott Christensen's website. I absolutely love his work, and he does these little sketches, which is what I've done here. So in this video, I'm just going to show you these little sketches that I painted, and just ways that you can do quick sketches when you're out and about in things such as your car, when it's perhaps not practical to get out of your car and paint on plein air. So we'll talk about that in the video. Just before I start the video, I'd like to quickly tell you about my Patreon channel. Each month I upload a full-length painting tutorial video where I go over everything, including how to paint an artwork and mix all the colours, which I demonstrate on my palette. Also, I've got loads of other content, photos, lesson notes and other stuff as well, all for just $5 a month, and I've put the link in the description box below. So without further ado, we'll just get straight into the video, and I hope you enjoy it. So, as I said in the intro here, this location is in Northland in far north New Zealand, and I just love this area. If you're like me and you're one of those landscape painters that loves painting rolling green hills, then this is just a brilliant location. And I often come for drives through here just to look at the landscape. I often go plein air painting here as well. It's kind of one of my go-to spots. So what I did was I was just driving along this dirt road, and right here is where I pulled over in my car and set up my little painting journal to paint the view. It's just an absolutely epic view. When you come over the hill here, you can just see this beautiful vista of rolling hills. It's absolutely stunning in my opinion. This location in northern New Zealand is bordering on the subtropics, so we get warm summers and mild wet winters, so everything's often very green. Now this is where I pulled up in my car, where I started my first of my little paintings, painting this view over here. I'm painting on some craft paper, which is kind of like card, and it's a journal which, as I said in my intro, that I ordered from Scott Christensen's Adventure of Painting website. So Scott Christensen, he's a landscape artist, and he often does little quick thumbnail sketches in these craft journals, and they just make great little paintings, but absolutely awesome for doing really quick studies when you're out and about. Say you're in an area such as the place that I'm in and you want to do some paintings of it and you want to see what works. So it's just another way of information gathering. Now, I'm not sponsored by Scott Christensen or anything, but I think these painting journals are great and I find his work very inspiring. Now, the cool thing about these painting journals is they have some dots marked as a rectangle to paint in. So what I did was I just put masking tape around the rectangle area where I'm going to be painting, and immediately got to work. So I sketched out my composition using burnt sienna mixed with liquid original. Liquid helps to speed up the drying time, and I am using oil paint to paint this. The brand of paints I'm using are Blue Ridge oil paints, and the colours I'm using include titanium white, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, cadmium red, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue and phthalo green. If you want to get your hands on some Blue Ridge oil paints, I've put the link in the description box below. Now, whenever I start an artwork, I always paint my dark values and shadows first. It helps me to gauge the tonality of the painting, so that's what I did here. So I started off with the cloud shadows and then working on those trees in the background, mostly using a mix of ultramarine blue with some burnt sienna, titanium white and a little alizarin crimson. And then for those dark tree shadows, I've used ultramarine blue with some yellow ochre. I've gone back to painting the sky here. The sky itself is a mix of ultramarine blue with some titanium white and a small amount of phthalo green. And I'm using pretty small brushes as well, mostly number 3 and number 2 flat brushes. These are Rosemary & Co brushes, which I've been using for years. They're just brilliant for oil painting. I'm using brushes from their classic range, which are mostly bristle flat brushes, filberts and rounds. And if you want to get your hands on some Rosemary brushes, I've put the link in the description box below. I'm being real quick here as I'm painting this artwork. I really don't want to spend too long on it, but it's just, for me, it's a good way to just go around in my local area, just sit in my car and just paint some views of landscapes that perhaps aren't easy to paint outside. Maybe they're at the side of a main road, for example, and it's not easy to just stand at the side of the road whilst there's cars whizzing past. So this is the advantage of doing these small studies just on my lap in my car. I'm also resting this on my Alla Prima Pochade box, and I use these for plein air painting, also in my studio as well. These are handmade by a guy called Ben Haggett who lives in Montana. His Pochade boxes that he hand makes are so intuitive, and he's really thought of everything when it comes to plein air painting. So even the fact that I can extend the whole easel out like this and just rest it on my lap is another great feature of this Pochade box. Normally I'd mount it on a tripod and paint outside. I've put a link to the Alla Prima Pochade box in the description below. Now here I'm painting the grass. This is mostly a mix of yellow ochre with ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow, titanium white, and then I've kicked up the saturation with a little phthalo green and rounded off the colour with some cadmium red. Keep in mind that grass is some of the more lighter values to be found in the landscape, so it can't be too dark. And it needs to be much lighter in value than the trees, which are some of the darkest values to be found in the landscape. The other thing we need to be careful of is that the green is not too saturated, otherwise it's going to look garish in the painting, and it will also bring it forward as well. So in order to create the atmospheric depth, those distant greens need to be much more desaturated. In order to tame your green, if it's looking too neon or just a little bit unnatural, then mix in its colour opposite, in this case red. So I've mixed in a little bit of cadmium red into my mix, and that just knocks that green back. Now once I'd marked in the main colours and values in the scene, I then went back across the whole thing and just started adding some finer details, such as these distant trees here. I went back over this and actually used some ultramarine blue with a little bit of yellow ochre and titanium white and just painted over that previous layer. As I'm using Liquin Original, the liquin was already starting to dry a little bit as I went back over this area within the painting. So now adding a lot more detail. Also my brushes are getting smaller as well. Here I'm using a number 0 round brush. Next I begin restating the dark values in these trees here. Again using a mix of ultramarine blue with yellow ochre and some titanium white. Now normally when I paint on plein air, I normally paint with the canvas or the surface that I'm painting on in shadow, but here it's in the direct sunlight, and unfortunately there wasn't really much I could do about it just because I was already limited for space in my car and in an awkward position, and also setting up my video camera as well, which was a bit difficult, but nevertheless this painting still worked out pretty well. This is where I was adding the last details to this painting, mostly the shadows from the trees and just other little things as well. And then I just painted the suggestion of a few cows in the field as well. The other thing is, with painting this small studies, I made sure to get a lot of reference photos as well, so I can use that to refer to. And then when I get back to the studio, I can start on either some pencil sketches, or maybe I can design it on Procreate, and then I'll create a colour study. But I'll be developing this idea further. So this was the first of my paintings done on this page, and I'm just peeling off the masking tape here. So on to my next study, and I just drove a little bit further down the road and this view caught my eye. I really like that black poplar tree and the way it's illuminated in the evening sun. So I think I can make a really nice composition out of this. Perhaps when I do a studio painting of this, if I decide to, I can add some farm animals in it as well. So just like before, I've just put some masking tape underneath my existing painting that I've already done. I've got those little markers that are already on the paper so that I can mark the borders of this painting, and I begin sketching out my composition. Again, using burnt sienna mixed with liquid, and I'm applying that with a number 0 round brush. And just like that first painting, the first thing I do is paint my dark values first, because this helps to create the tonal dynamic in the painting. It makes it much easier to add those areas in light, and also to get the saturation of the colours correct as well. So I start with the cloud shadows here, and this is a mix of ultramarine blue with some burnt sienna, some titanium white, and just a little bit of alizarin crimson. I painted the tree shadows here with a mix of ultramarine blue, some yellow ochre, and a little bit of titanium white. This is because the shadows in these trees will be a bit lighter than the shadows of the trees that are in the foreground, just because these are in the midground and the value scale is starting to narrow a little bit. So our darkest darks won't be as dark in the midground as if they are in the foreground. We'll find our darkest darks in the foreground. Next I start marking in the shadows of this black poplar tree, and this is a mix of ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, a little bit of cadmium yellow and a small amount of cadmium red as well. If I need to, I can also add titanium white to adjust the value, but yellow itself is a light value colour, so this will often lighten the mixture anyway. The tree shadow here is going to be higher in chroma just because it's in the foreground. Now once I'd marked in my main areas of shadows, I started painting the highlights on the clouds. This is a mix of titanium white with a little bit of burnt sienna, and I start marking those in, and then I start painting the sky, and this was ultramarine blue, a little phthalo green, and some titanium white. Now just like before, I'm using pretty small brushes, mostly number 3 and number 2 flat brushes, and number 3 filbert brushes, and number 0 round brushes. These are really small paintings. Now another cool thing about doing these types of studies is if you're new to plein air painting and you find the idea of painting outdoors a bit daunting, this can be a way to ease yourself into it, because you can sit in your car and you can look at the landscape directly, and you can start getting in the groove of observing the landscape and painting it directly from life. Then this should help to increase your confidence, and then you can even then begin to start actually painting outdoors. Now I'm going to be making a video on how to start plein air painting, how to get into it, and also how to overcome some of your fears of painting outdoors. This is certainly something I had when I started painting outdoors, but I actually found a group of plein air painters and went painting with them, and it was a really enjoyable experience. And just painting from life, whether it's sat here in your car, just looking out the window and doing these little studies, or actual plein air painting, just goes a long way to really improving your landscape painting, and it really helps you to understand things like colours and values in the landscape. In my opinion, I've learnt so much from painting outdoors, and stuff that would have taken me a lot longer to learn if I was solely painting in the studio. So I'd recommend painting outdoors or doing studies such as these. Now here I've been working on the canopies of these black poplar trees, and the areas in light are a mix of yellow ochre with some cadmium yellow, ultramarine blue, titanium white, a little phthalo green, and a little bit of cadmium red. As I said before, trees are some of the darkest values to be found in the landscape, but I found that broadleaf trees are lighter in value than, say, something like a conifer tree, for example, but still darker than the value of the grass. So the grass is pretty much the same colours that I've used in these poplar trees, but I've just used more titanium white in the mix to not only desaturate the colour a little bit, but just to make the value lighter as well. Now just like before, at this point in the painting I'd marked in the main areas of shadow and colour, and then I went back over it and just restated some of those dark values and just tidied up areas as well. Just added a few smaller details that's just going to add to the painting. Again, I've taken photo reference as well, and I actually painted this view before, and it's a view that I actually want to do a proper studio painting of, so this is really good information gathering, and I can use this little study as well. Now with all of my paintings, I save my lightest values until the end of it, and in this case it was just painting a few highlights in the clouds and then the light values that are within the tree canopies as well, where it's shimmering in the direct sunlight. So overall, just adding some texture to these poplar trees and also in the grass in the foreground as well. Just like with the first painting, I really didn't spend too long on it. I think probably about half an hour this painting took me to paint. And then once finished, I peeled off the masking tape just to see what it looks like, especially next to the other painting. It's so satisfying peeling off the masking tape and revealing the painting underneath. So I really enjoyed painting these two artworks. It's just great if you don't have much time and you just want to get a couple of quick studies done, or to be able to just work from your car and park in places where normally you wouldn't be able to just set up your plein air painting easel and paint, especially if it's at the side of a busy road, for example. But as I said before, I can use these paintings as information for studio paintings where I'll be developing an idea for some rural landscapes. And here's the front of my car with all my painting gear. I'm very lucky to have all this beautiful scenery on my back doorstep in my local area, so I find this place very inspiring to paint. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel. Now if you'd like to learn more about painting landscapes, then check out the painting resources I have on my website at samuelerb.com. Got some free written painting tutorials on my blog, also some full-length painting tutorial videos for sale as well, and you can get instant access to all of those videos and much more by subscribing to my Patreon channel for just $5 a month, where each month you get a full-length painting tutorial video plus access to all the 2 years worth of videos that I've already made, as well as reference photos, lesson notes and other awesome content as well. So this is pretty much like a landscape painting course basically, and it's all for just $5 a month, and I've put the link in the description box below. Now just before you go, if you'd like to receive a copy of my ebook Introduction to Oil Painting, then subscribe to my email list, which is on my website at samuelerb.com, and again I've put the link in the description box below. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're having a beautiful day wherever you are in the world, and I shall see you in the next video.